One of the things that people have stated about Left 4 Dead's story was how in the world did the Dead Airplane go all the way to Blood Harvest? There was actually originally supposed to be an answer to that question. Damn It was a scrapped Left 4 Dead 1 campaign that was meant to be a link between Dead Air and Blood Harvest. And you can judge by its name, the main set piece of the 3-map campaign was a dam. There's even multiple scrap survival maps, and I'll show those later in the video. They're actually very important. The second half is definitely going to get more and more interesting. Stay tuned and make sure to subscribe. The campaign consists of a field where you see the Dead Airplane in the background. Map 1 being an orchard, and map 2 being at the campground, and the finale being in the quote-unquote dam. And if the campaign would have been released as DLC, which apparently might have been thought about back in the day, keep in mind that the campaign was never finished, and many aspects of the unfinished elements of it have leaked. There is a full build of this campaign out there. And there's also plenty of fan-made versions of the campaign trying to fill the holes of what was lost, essentially. Way back when Left 4 Dead was made by Turtle Rock Studios in 2005, and way before it was acquired by Valve. And it's unknown to this day why Valve never acquired this material of Damn It specifically. Some people state there's a legal gray area between putting out this stuff, while some people disagree and say there's no legal gray area, but I'm gonna just side with the team that says there is a legal gray area. Valve probably did not buy this campaign when they purchased Turtle Rock Studios, or it was made afterwards. Your guess is as good as mine. But either way, it doesn't stop the fact that this campaign ceased development, and it has a lot of detailed areas and many interesting aspects that no other Left 4 Dead 1 campaign has. There's no survivor dialogue, and the campaign poster is a really early version of the cast from the early betas of Left 4 Dead. And you can tell how early this was, as survivors aren't really figured out yet. And one of the leaked documents for this campaign showed the flow of the maps. And according to this document, it was going to take place in the Kinzuya Dam, a large dam which is located on the Allegheny National Park, which serves as a flood control for the river. There were many aspects of the textures and rough spots in each map, but it is a nice look of what could have been in each level. And this campaign is a lot harder than any other campaign in the game. There's a lot of tier 2 spawns just outside of the starting area. Panic events are really interesting, with certain maps encouraging players to split up and do certain events in pairs. Has never really been done in a map to this day. And many textures and models in this campaign are completely unused, like the apple orchard models or the RVs that are seen here, old car models, a plane, mist effects, motorhomes. And of course, because of the unfinished aspects of this campaign, there's a lot of bugs. So note that a lot of this footage you're going to see is some people's interpretation of what these maps could have looked like finished, and obviously the leaked build that is really rough. Map 1 is the Orchid, and it begins at the back of the Dead Airplane. And there's actually a lot of set pieces throughout the map that keep this campaign looking different from any other map that is in the game. Beginning in the airfield, which to this day has never been explored officially in Left 4 Dead. And there's multiple hangars and exploding barrels that are from the sacrifice, actually. They make an appearance in this campaign, which shows that Turtle Rock made these exploding barrels. This is actually a very important point that I will tie up later in the video, so stay tuned. There's many throwables throughout the map, hills. The next part is there's actually an orchid section, which features the mist elements, and this area is located on the hillside, which dips down into the apple packing shed and storage facility. This area is heavily populated with infected and will generate at least one hurry up horde, which a useful tactic is to hang by the walls and try to just stay away from the infected. Another cool thing about Damn It is there is actually a lot of set pieces within each map. It obviously leads to the railroad section. There's actually a shallow, muddy river near the bottom. You go across, there will be a slope and some farmland beyond. A lot of the fan recreations of this maps actually look really good. The next section is a meadow, which will show a car near the center, and the safe room is actually located upstairs in the farmhouse and on the opposite side. But entering this area, you will actually go through a crescendo event, and streams of infected will begin to attack it. And the survivors must sprint to the other side and fight through the meadow. Infected actually will not stop until you go to the safe room. And fun fact, according to the leaked documents, the infected were actually supposed to crawl on the ground through the orchid. Also, the panic event is one of the rare panic events not triggered by anything at all. It's just the survivors walking into the orchid field. And there's also tank spawns on every single map, so keep in mind these are some difficult maps. To make it to the next save from the survivors must make their way across a bridge and over through a lake and find their way into the campground. And once there, they gotta go through the woods and navigate through various RVs and campsites before taking a hike to the trail. These are actually new models and they look great. They're not used in Left 4 Dead at all. The hiking trail takes them to the section of the woods that has been burnt down, and they have to move through these scorched patches of the forest. This part is pretty easy to get lost, I'm not gonna lie. But in order to clear the path, the survivors need to split up in one group and activate the generator that powers the mechanism. Then the second group needs to separate. Once they manage to activate the mechanism, the lift, it's time to find the shelter to the safe room, which is in front of the dam. And honestly, this is the best looking part of the whole campaign. I think they really nailed down the construction site side of this map. I think this does look really nice. I like the custom models too. They're a really nice touch. The panic event is pretty unclear on what to do, and I did get lost in the fire section though, playing this map for the first time. This level has got some potential to it though. Also, a panic event where you move logs to one side to another is actually a really interesting idea too. Originally, the bridge that survivors were going to cross near the beginning was actually designed to be a little bit more treacherous. The intention was that the bridge was extremely fragile and would eventually collapse if the survivors used explosives or killed any boomers on it. Additionally, the burnt forest section was created with the idea that the fire would spread and move across the area, giving the survivors a unique hazard to try to avoid while crossing the terrain. They never really implemented this though, so that's why it looks really unfinished, and it still may damage the player if they stay there for a long period of time. Map 3 is the dam. The map is the finale, and if you look at the signage placed throughout the map, clearly the dam that I mentioned earlier that is meant to connect the beginning of Blood Harvest, which shows that if you look even in these early documents, they were planning on connecting these two maps together. So the dam was eventually supposed to lead to the national park. Firstly, the survivors must make their way through a generator room, and this will actually begin the map with a crescendo event that requires them to alert the horde by blowing through the obstacles in the way, and then this will also summon a tank. Afterwards, they'll have to proceed on foot through the dam, and the route to the top of the dam is actually tricky. The dam is divided in 3 separate levels. On the first level of the dam, the survivors need to press a button that opens a way for them to progress through, but then the finale will actually start, and the floodgates will eventually begin to close on them. After the survivors get inside, they need to go to the elevator and get to the second level. If they don't manage to get through the first level fast enough, they will die. So yeah, this is a pretty rigorous panic event, or finale, whatever you want to call this at this point. Once you get to the second floor, you will get to a ceiling area that is really easy to fall off of. The second level of the dam is really difficult, especially if this map was in Left 4 Dead 2, it would be really hard to beat. The survivors must go across beams that lead to the upper parts of the dam. It is extremely vulnerable to get attacks. Smokers are really dangerous here, chargers would be terrible here, and jockeys. You'll have to get through here to get to the next part of the map and get to the second level, which will actually take them to the final part of the dam. At the top, survivors will see the floodgates are blocking them from getting clear from the other side, so they'll have to trigger the floodgates to begin to clear the path, and the infected will begin pouring through and a tank will spawn. I like how this map has a lot of bite-sized parts of it. You're in one area and you get to the next area, and it's actually significantly different layout-wise, and you can tell a lot of the same aspects in the campaign really are trying different things all at once. But I'm not gonna lie, this map is actually extremely difficult. It is really easy to get lost in all of the levels, just like the orchid section in map 1. Finding the house is also a little difficult sometimes, especially if you don't know where to go. Map 3 is probably the most difficult map. It is just panic event after panic event after panic event. It feels like you're just going through this cheap padding each part of this map has. The start of the finale, for whatever reason, you have to forcefully fight a tank in the beginning of it, and they put a panic event that is essentially just like the map 3 section of Dead Air. And then you have to start a dam that actually pushes the survivors. It's really confusing on first playthroughs as people don't really know what's going on, especially with the dam flooding through. And it's very easy for people to die in this section, especially if you don't realize that the doors are going to close if you don't escape out of this area. And these doors are like really tiny. You have to really know that they're there. And the pillar section of this map would have been really cheesy in versus, especially in Left 4 Dead 2. This would be just absolute hell. The actual finale is not even that difficult, but the whole map just feels like a giant panic event. The actual finale is actually not as hard compared to the rest of the map. And if you want to play something that is close to finished, there's actually plenty of restorations of the Damn It experience, so keep that in mind. The river. Now, technically this part is speculation, but there's a lot of proof backing up this cut campaign. There's actually 2 leaked survival maps that were in this leak for Damn It. Originally, this section of this video was just going to be a paragraph of me going over the leftover survival maps, probably just, little tidbits of how Valve probably reused them for making the sacrifice. Oh boy, do I have a treat for you, because this is actually where it gets a lot more interesting. You're gonna want to strap into this section. These 2 survival maps are actually from a build of this campaign, Damn It, and they were just somehow unused survival maps. One of them being called High Rise, or some people calling it the Union Tech Tower, which is a really good looking map, especially for it being canceled for whatever reason and never coming out. But you can tell it's actually a part of that old Left 4 Dead 1 style of beta maps. Hell, walking through and seeing the newspapers moving around the wind, there's actually an old school feel to this map, and there's actually a giant helicopter model that is swaying in the ceiling. This crash helicopter is easily one of the coolest set pieces of the whole campaign. I actually did reuse this exact model when I made Whispers of Winter, which, oh my god, yes, I made Whispers of Winter, yeah. So this exact model is actually in the first map of that campaign, but yeah, I know, really bad campaign. How dare I? Maybe one day I'll make a video on how I made Whispers of Winter, but I'll save that for another day. But I especially love the custom models that are throughout this map that never get used, like the railing. Another detail that I want to note is how just detailed this map is outside of the survivor area. The infected area of this map is actually really well thought out. Usually scrapped beta maps don't even have that stuff figured out, so it shows there is a significant amount of work put into this one little survival map, quote unquote. And also, for it being a survival map, why would it have that much work put into it? Which, again, got me thinking, why would a survival map even have crazy amount of work done for the infected zombies only, when really you're not even going to be seeing that type of stuff in survival mode? Another fun fact is the sacrifice element is completely ripped from actually graffiti from this map, which actually references the Union Tech Tower. And there's even another graffiti texture that says the Union Tech Tower by name in Left 4 Dead 2 in every copy of the game, including yours. Is a really interesting thing to reference for something that you can't actually visit in the game. That's definitely another mic drop moment, as this detail right here is in the first part of the sacrifice safe room, and it is integral for this theory. So if you look at the map here, the sacrifice map 2 safe room, there's actually this decal here, and it says Union Tech Tower, which according to the map, it's actually nearby too, which actually references a greenhouse. Is interesting, yeah, really, greenhouse. And I wonder if that has to do with something in Left 4 Dead. It's another smoking gun to this theory, because the game's own lore references this exact area, and it's a very common for campaigns to actually reference what you're going to see later in a campaign. So No Mercy commonly likes to talk about the Mercy Hospital, or Dead Air talking about the airport and the graffiti. So the sacrifice referencing the Union Tech Tower that turns out to be one of these scrapped survival maps is actually a really interesting thing. It actually shows a lot more. This is actually interesting conspiracy on how this map was made. This was actually when I began to rewrite this video entirely, as was a really interesting thing, as this finale was probably planned to be a part of an in-between between Dead Air and Death Toll. The support for this theory is the map file for Union Tech Tower actually has a ghost animation model that actually handles the camera movement, and there is actually a finale camera that has movement programmed for the map that was supposed to pan upward to the rooftop of the Union Tech Tower after the finale either was lost or the survivors won. This animation is actually still in the game, so it's in every game of Left 4 Dead 2, but it goes unused. But for this map, it actually makes sense when you have the map that goes with this animation. This mock-up actually shows if you place Dead Air's greenhouse, and if you place it exactly next to the Union Tech Tower, just like the map decal states, it will look like this. And the pan to the ceiling will actually make sense, and it shows how the survivors would have been close by the start of Dead Air, and this would actually have made sense on why they got there. So I'm assuming the rescue vehicle in this map would have been the elevator, considering the fact when you start the panic event in survival mode, the elevator explodes, and that's probably how the finale would have started, and maybe you had to wait for another elevator or something. The campaign is commonly referred to as the River by some people in the community, but people speculate that the Union Tech Tower survival map was originally the finale for this River campaign. It was supposedly parts of the sacrifice could have been used for this campaign too, which actually brings me to the final part of this theory in a way. God, the sacrifice similarities, they don't stop, okay? Valve really said when they were making the sacrifice, let's just go through the vault of maps that we haven't used. But jokes aside, the final survival map is actually a coal freighter, which I'm sure a lot of people are, maybe if you're nerds like me, you probably know that this is the exact coal freighter or cargo freighter that is used on map 2 of the sacrifice. And yes, if you don't believe me, if you look at the models, they're the exact same models. They have the same compartments. It was clearly reused here. It's a little breadcrumb of what was supposed to be this River campaign, which is funny because a lot of this stuff in this leak actually got reused in the sacrifice, like the cargo ship, the Crow panic event, which is sort of like the damn it panic event where it's just nothing starts the panic event, I guess. And also, this should be noted that the literal exploding barrels debuted in the sacrifice and they made an achievement around it. Turtle Rock technically started with that first, but if we believe the more conspiracy theories, maybe this scrapped Dead Air to Death Toll connecting campaign would have also had parts of the sacrifice in it. And I mean, there's some people who believe that half of the sacrifice is actually the River campaign. But let me explain, as this is actually going to be where it gets good. The campaign starts near the harbor, which makes sense as the Death Toll boat would drop off the survivors and then they would make their way to the cargo ship, which actually lines up with the leaks. But the main difference would have been the finale. First 2 maps of the sacrifice actually kind of look like Turtle Rock maps. I've always felt that way. Maybe I'm saying this as a mapper, but I always thought the first 2 maps of the sacrifice looked the best. And I mean, they have a high amount of detail and color correction, particle effects, and low-key they kind of are challenging, at least compared to a lot of the official Valve maps. Turtle Rock actually loved doing a lot of challenging maps. You can see that with Damn It. So I feel like Turtle Rock making this, at least the first 2 levels, actually makes a lot of sense to me. And the finale of the sacrifice is clearly the port up from the passing, just remixed for Left 4 Dead 1. And Valve's own mapping styles tend to blend more into realism and less into flashy particle effects and more muted colors. They like realism, alright? I used to not believe that the scrapped River campaign was really even a thing, but these survival maps are really the bones of the River. If you're not convinced, there's actually some even more evidence, like the intro camera animation for the River campaign is referred to as the docks, which ironically lines up with the name of map 1 of the sacrifice, and hence there's actually a mock-up of what this said animation would look like on the sacrifice map 1 docks. And also the animation files and the game files are all unused, implying that the survivors would have been kicked off the Death Toll boat, having to go to the docks. The end of map 2 near the safe room has the roadway that lines up to another roadway that is featured in the Union Tech Tower map, as seen here. So yeah, these alleyways use the same exact textures. And the name of the sacrifice skybox is literally called the River.hdr. And if you actually dig through the files of any copy of Left 4 Dead 2, there is a docks HDR and a high-rise HDR, which lines up with the scrapped Tech Tower map skybox. So multiple soundscapes also reuse the river in their name. Clearly it was a code name for the sacrifice, or even the docks being a potential code name for this river campaign too. The original trailer for the sacrifice campaign was actually at night. A lot of these beta maps were probably at night, and I think that was just a theme for all Left 4 Dead maps at the time. So it could have used a leftover skybox that I actually mentioned earlier. Also in the skybox, you'll see there's flames in the background, which is similar to Dead Air, as Dead Air has a lot of burning buildings in the campaign skybox. But if we go back to the map on the sacrifice safe room, it literally mentions a greenhouse, which lines up incredibly well with how the 2 campaigns are supposed to link to each other. The Union Tech Tower was literally right next to the Dead Air greenhouse. So thanks to this map that is in every copy of Left 4 Dead 2, you understand that this map was really what the river campaign was supposed to be. Also, Valve must have added the harbor section in the beginning of Dead Air as a slight retcon of what the river campaign was supposed to be. I'm assuming once the river was scrapped and reused for the sacrifice, they added this harbor section later. Why weren't these assets used in future DLC campaigns? Well, we actually have an answer for that. The big answer is Valve most likely did not have the assets for Dammit, and people have asked former Valve devs on why they can't reuse certain aspects of Dammit, and it's actually just they don't have the rights at all. They can't even touch the models that are used in the campaign. But it seems like they do have the rights to the quote-unquote river campaign, which clearly was flipped into becoming the sacrifice, where the finale and its connections to Dead Air would most likely be removed, and the Union Tech Tower survival map, or map in general, that would be briefly referenced in leftover graffitis and the map. The reason why this is such an interesting what if is if Valve went a different route with their DLC, they might have never made Crash Course and Sacrifice, and somehow let's just pretend they got the rights to Dammit and they finished the river campaign in its former glory. Maybe the DLC lineup would have been completely different. Maybe we wouldn't have gotten a Sacrifice campaign, or maybe the one we would have gotten would have been completely different and would have had a different map 1 and 2. Maybe the Sacrifice idea with the port would have been actually made around 2 unique maps instead of it just being copies of leftover maps. Crash Course technically maybe wouldn't exist either, as there would already be 2 DLC maps out. Why put time into making the Crash Course campaign, I guess? Just food for thought though. It would change up the story quite a bit, as while I feel like these 2 campaigns are 2 missing pieces of Left 4 Dead's official lore, but maybe we would have gotten survivor dialogue showing the falling out between John and Amanda Slater, and them kicking out the survivors after Death Toll. Maybe we would have seen elements of what would have happened to the pilot from Dead Air. So I hope I brought you to a wild ride in a way, because this was a really exciting video to make. If you want me to do a sequel to this video, I'll actually talk about the cut content and maps that are within Left 4 Dead 2. When I make a sequel to this video, expect me to at least talk about Deadline. Anyways, that is the video. Thank you guys for watching. There is a Patreon down below if you guys want to get videos early and support the channel. There's also a Discord and Instagram, all that stuff. Make sure to subscribe. Take care.